The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great. Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, everybody, good morning and happy Friday. Welcome in Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here. No Casey McAllister today. We're all, we're all at home right now doing the show from three different spots, waiting for this 3 to 5 to 6 to 1 to half an inch of snow coming. We're not really sure what the snow accumulation total is going to be, but if they were right like last time, I hate snow already. I'm done. I thought it was cool the first night. After that, I'm over it. About slip and fall on my ass every single time I walk outside. I'm just over it, over the cold. Bring on the 30s and 40s, baby.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be cold. It's going to snow more today. At least none of us are under the weather, so we can just power through that, and we'll be okay. I think we're 3 for 3 on not being 100% today. But, if Abdul Carter can play through a shoulder sprain in the Orange Bowl, we can all play through a little congestion for the podcast world, right?
My favorite comment that we got. Oh, sorry, real quick, Elliot. With all of us being sick, someone messaged into the show yesterday, to our station message board that they felt that they, by listening to us and how sick we sound, that they felt like when they listen to the show, they have to put a mask on to listen to the show. That's how. So
it's fair.
That's fair. Might have a point. They might have a point.
No, sorry guys, a lot of sniffling, a lot of coughing.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. This is, I mean, you talk about like the snow being an issue. I like the snow. I told Jacob this on Monday, I think, and it's been what a week it's been.
Yeah.
Monday, I said, Jacob, I like one good one. I like one good snow. That's it. I walked outside on Monday to shovel. My nose and my throat have suffered from it. I'm out. I'm done on snow. I'm done walking outside. I'm going to stay inside my home for the rest of my life. That's it. From this point on, I'm not leaving the home.
I like that.
Well, the good thing is being snowed in tonight, if you're a Buckeye fan or just a college football fan, there's at least going to be plenty of stuff to watch tonight. So that's exciting. We're going to get to that in a moment. Notre Dame in the national championship game. Marcus Freeman, shout out to Marcus Freeman, Dayton's own Marcus Freeman, former Bearcat coach or part of the coaching staff, of course. So we all love Marcus Freeman. We're excited for that. We'll talk about that coming up here in just a moment. Ohio State, Texas coming up later on tonight. The winner of that matchup will go on to face Notre Dame in the national title, the inaugural national championship game for the 12-team college football playoffs. We got Elliot's headlines we'll get to in a second. NFL playoffs, bold predictions as we finally get to watch NFL playoff action this coming up weekend. We'll get to our buy or sell that we didn't get to yesterday. We got a loaded show today, and I'm excited for it as we head in to the weekend. But I hope everyone has some fun plans lined up this weekend, even if we are snowed in again, nonetheless. But let's kick it to our guy, Elliot. Let's do a little. Oh, do we have it? We do. Yes. Elliot's headlines, ladies and gentlemen.
Score updates, breaking news, local and national headlines, whatever's going on in the world of sports, Elliot has you covered. Off the Bench brings you Elliot's headlines.
Well, there we go.
That's
there
fun.
We go.
That's
Jacob,
fun.
Jacob, did you get a whistle?
So I decided I'm not going to start the whistle remote.
Okay.
I made that decision. I did not forget to grab it.
Elliot, doesn't this have
fair.
all the feels of what I said we had a sounder? Remember, like this has all the feels of Elliot's new headline sounder. I'm so glad that Jacob has taken that title from me for the time being, because God knows I'll do something else. But yes.
No problem. Happy to help.
Yep. Appreciate it.
College basketball. There was a couple ranked games last night. Michigan State, 88-54 win at home against Washington. Oregon, in a rematch of the Rose Bowl, they beat Ohio State on the road, 15th ranked Oregon, 73-71, came down to the wire. And Purdue, 20th ranked Purdue, they take care of Rutgers on the road. Moving over to the NBA, you have the Lakers and Hornets being postponed due to the LA wildfires. LA is still going through it right now, so absolutely brutal what's happening over there, and it's you got to at least hope maybe it gets a little bit better soon, because it's really, really bad when I'm seeing on the TV and everything.
The wind is
terrible.
Crazy. It's just not slowing down.
Yeah,
the Cavaliers. Go ahead.
JJ Redick. No, you're okay.
Yep.
By the way, when we do the show remote, there's like a little delay, so we're always talking over one another. We apologize for that. But Elliot, sorry, I don't always mean to cut you off, but no, JJ Redick's home. There's been a few players' homes that have been impacted by the fires, and JJ Redick's house is one of those, unfortunately. So, but yeah, like just seeing how this is impacting everything. Obviously, we talked about some playoff games that are going to be moved because of this. Like, there's just a lot going on, and these fires, no end in sight. It seems that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
The Cavaliers dropped 132 on the Raptors, 132-126 to continue the 12-game winning streak now. Darius Garland had a season-high 40 points in their win. You had the Rockets. They beat the Grizzlies 119-115 on the road. The Heat win again, 97-92. And the Suns, they take care of business against the Hawks, 123-115. College football, again, we're going to talk about it today, but you might as well give the stats from last night. Final score 27-24. You had to worry about scoring too early if you were Notre Dame with 15 seconds left.
That's right.
The broadcast booth. But I'm glad that the field goal with 15 seconds or 8 seconds was able to be enough there.
Another thing
24.
You had to worry about with a game-winning field goal as time was expiring. I think it was with like 10, 12 seconds left. But James Franklin played 2 deep safeties just in case Notre Dame didn't want to win by 3 and they wanted to win by 7. He was really worried about the fake there when they could have just went to a national championship with a 40-yard field goal. So shout out to James Franklin for being on his game there.
That's our guy. Riley Leonard, 15-23. He had a touchdown, 2 picks, 223 yards, as I said. On the ground, though, he had a 35 and a touchdown there. Love, 45 yards and a touchdown. Jacob, the backup quarterback for Notre Dame, I legit thought they were going to keep him in the game yet last night. Who is that guy?
Yeah, Steve Angeli. He's much better of a thrower than Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard's legs, obviously, maybe second to none of quarterbacks remaining in the playoffs. But yeah, Angeli's definitely a better thrower of the football. We've seen it time and time again this year. Riley Leonard only averages 6.7 yards per attempt on the season throwing the football. Yeah. He has not been a good passer. I don't know whether Angeli's a better player or not when you incorporate the running as well, but it's certainly in the pass game. I think Notre Dame would be better if they played Angeli, but they've gotten this far with their leader in Riley Leonard, and he's playing well enough. Colin Coward last night said, we all see Riley Leonard, he sees Josh Allen. So I don't know whether we're watching different football games, but he's really high on Riley Leonard as we progress to the national championship.
Or just high.
Nicholas Singleton. Go ahead, yeah. Nicholas Singleton, 15 carries, 84 yards, 3 touchdowns. Him and Tyler Warren were incredible.
Yeah.
It was just the quarterback play from Penn State that killed him. Aller, 12 of 23, 130 yards, and one of the worst interceptions you can throw given the circumstances. So Penn State don't win the big game. They don't win big games. They didn't win the big game last night, and they're going home. James Franklin, Do you think he's done enough to not be on the hot seat?
I think so. When you win 2 playoff games, I know everyone's going to talk about who they were against. Obviously, SMU and Boise State, double-digit favorites in both games. Not that big game feel, as we talked about with Mike Golick Jr. a couple days ago. But I still think when you advance to the semifinal of a 12-team playoff, you made it to a conference championship, which you haven't done in a long time. I think that matters, and I think Franklin's going to be back. The one thing I wanted to point out, a lot of people talking about Aller. He laid a stinker last night. That's not who he is. I was a big Aller guy going into last night, but looking into it a little bit more, maybe I shouldn't be. Aller's average game versus the 6th-ranked opponents he played this year, 14 of 25, that's 56%, for 157 yards and under 6.5 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. He's only reached 7 yards per attempt in 1 game. It was against Ohio State. He had 7.3 yards per attempt. He laid an egg last night, but it was 12 of 23 for 140 yards, 6.1 yards per attempt, no touchdowns, 1 interception. That's the stat line he's had against ranked opponents. Maybe that's just who he is against better defenses, and that's a shame to say because after SMU and Boise State, I was really high on him. I was talking about him maybe coming out in this draft class, but certainly needs the extra year, definitely going to come back, but definitely a worry as we look into next year when they play quality opponents, something to remember.
Yes, and I think last night too, like Jacob told me before the game, and here's the thing: I haven't watched a ton of college football this year. I've watched a couple Penn State games. I've watched a couple Notre Dame games. I did feel like Riley Leonard was okay in the games that I've watched. I didn't think he was anything special. I liked Aller coming into the game. I thought he was the best quarterback available. Jacob said he was the best quarterback from last night heading into the game. Obviously right now I probably have to walk back my statement.
Yeah, me too.
So moving on around the league, the NFL, that is, you have the Browns, Jets, and Jags are officially all hosting London games next season. So the Bengals do play the Browns and the Jags. So maybe there's a chance. I would have a hard time believing they're doing divisional games in London. But the Jags obviously would be a favorite, I would say, to host the Bengals overseas.
There is still the Berlin game, a Germany game in 2025 that they have not announced yet. That's what a lot of people have been circling for the Bengals' potential international game. I know they're due on the calendar to be one of those teams that might go overseas, and it would make sense to have Cincinnati go to Germany with the whole sister city, all that good stuff that we have the connections over there. So if we don't end up in London, I think we should keep an eye out for that Germany game potentially as well.
Yeah, the Browns-Jets. So the Browns and Jets are going to play each other in London. The Jaguars will also. I mean, I didn't realize the Jaguars have this deal with the NFL. Like they'll play an annual game every year, but they're like in charge. They are in charge of the entire execution of the game from beginning to end. I don't know what kind of deal that is. I know that the Khan family. They work with Wembley very closely. I know that I forgot the Tony Khan, the son of the owner of the Jaguars. He runs AEW, which is that wrestling promotion. They do a big wrestling show every year at Wembley. They have a close relationship with the people at Wembley, so it's a weird little setup they have. But the Browns and Jets will play each other at Wembley next year, and then the Jaguars, an opponent to be named later, as you guys talked about, could potentially be the Cincinnati Bengals. But the Jaguars, if I'm a Jags fan, I'm kind of pissed off that you just volunteer to give up a home game. Like, it's kind of unique seeing your team play in those games as like a one-off, maybe every once in a while. But the fact that they literally play multiple games there every year, they give up a home game to do it, I would be upset if I'm a season ticket holder of the Jaguars, nonetheless.
Pre-Trevor Lawrence, it looked like they might have been moved to London at some point. But now that they got Trevor and locked him down and a lot of the stuff they're doing to that stadium and the rest of Jacksonville, I think they're probably safe, at least for now. But that was definitely talked about, and I think had some legs when we were talking about moving a team over there. They were definitely the one that stood out.
Yep.
I think it's terrible. I think the Jaguars franchise is a joke. The fact that you would willingly not play 2 home games over here is pretty sad. I think they usually give them an away and a home. Is that what happens?
Yes, I'm not entirely sure, yeah.
And final NFL news, some more details came out yesterday, I should say, about Jermaine Burton involved in a domestic dispute. The details are bad. The details are really bad, and I would say that I would be very shocked if Jermaine Burton was a Cincinnati Bengal next season. Very shocked.
Yeah, I'll let the legal process do its thing, and then we'll see what happens. But yeah, if that the contents of the 911 call and the rest of that story are proven true, then I would certainly agree with you, Elliot.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are going to do, you definitely got to let the legal process kind of play itself out. You don't want to cast them aside too quickly for, all the details. But at the same time, it's not as if this is a player that has not been a distraction all season. I think that he's on the verge of probably being just let go just because this might be the final straw. Like if he was, contributing all season and then something like this happens. And by the way, I'm not glossing over the severity of it. I'm just saying the accusations.
100%.
You don't overreact initially. But I think you should overreact if you're the Bengals at this point. Just say, come on, dude. Like, you're just constantly in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. You had an opportunity. I mean, with Boyd gone and them going and drafting him, and he had a chance to show the front office that, you know what, T. Higgins, we love T. Higgins, but I'm here to replace the production of Tyler Boyd this season and replace the production of T. Higgins moving forward. I can't, and you have Joe Burrow throwing you the football. I can't think of a guy that has just squandered more of an opportunity than this individual has. We all deserve second chances, but this would be the 3rd, 4th, 5th in just one season. obviously has some growing up to do, and it's unfortunate. I never root for people and individuals to fail, but it's like at some point when you're handed so many great opportunities and you have nothing to show for it, it's hard to pull for you after a certain point. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. But that's a very weird situation for sure.
You're definitely right in terms of play on the field can give you a little bit more of a leash. And, when you're missing practices.
Whether that's right or wrong. Yeah.
You're 100% right, though. That's how it works. And, if Jamar Chase were to miss a Saturday practice and be at the casino gambling, it's not nearly as big of a story as if it's a guy like Jermaine Burton. And then that's just the truth, whether we like it or not. And then when you keep compounding story after story, at some point, it doesn't necessarily matter what's true and what's not. And I hate to say that, especially in a situation like this, but when you're such a big distraction and you're not really giving anything to the team, then I don't know what the benefit is of having you on the roster, even removing all the legality aspects of things. If you're such a distraction as basically a practice squad level player that's getting 6 snaps a game, that we have to not let you travel to games, we have to have you inactive because you're missing practice time, you're a 3rd round pick that we've spent a significant amount of draft capital on to have you be a significant part of this team, and you're turning your nose up at it. That's just not a guy that I think helps the locker room in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I always say, is your talent worth the noise?
Yep.
And again, this isn't like our views and saying it's not a big deal what he's accused of. This is just how sports works, whether we like it or not. Is your talent worth the noise? And his talent is not worth the noise. There's some talent. I mean, look, not making light of this. Deshaun Watson, is his talent worth the noise? It used to be. The talent used to be worth the noise, and that's why the Browns and the Saints and the Falcons and the Steelers and so many other teams lined up, knowing the backlash they were going to get if they signed Deshaun Watson. They knew that they were going to take on a backlash of criticism, but they were willing to gamble and say, hey, the second Deshaun goes out there and looks like he did in Houston, it's still going to be talked about the way it was with Ben Roethlisberger. It's going to be talked about the way it was when Kobe Bryant went through that similar situation in the NBA, right? But their talent was louder than the noise. Deshaun, you're bad. That noise takes over. And Burton, you're bad. The noise has taken over. It's just how sports works, whether it's right or wrong at the end of the day. We'll see what happens.
But those are your headlines.
There you go. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here, 1410 ESPN Radio and Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. Some other headlines, too, just to kind of throw some out there, just quick hits. We're not going to spend a whole segment on them. But what do you guys think about Pete Carroll potentially getting back to the NFL? Pete Carroll met with the Chicago Bears earlier this week, and the Bears really liked the interview, and we'll see what happens there. But Pete Carroll will also interview with the Raiders next week. Do you guys see Pete Carroll landing a head coaching job in 2025?
Of 70-plus-year-old coaches that are getting head coaching interviews, he is my favorite. I'll put it that way. I think he'll do the best. I'm not exactly jumping at a 73-year-old to coach my team. And I know Pete Carroll has had a ton of success both at the college and NFL level. He's won Super Bowl and national championship. He's gotten there multiple times. He's a great coach. There's no doubt in my mind that he's a great coach. He's a Hall of Fame coach. But I think at 73 years old, especially the teams you're listing there, the Bears, your number one priority is getting Caleb Williams along to where you thought he was going to be pre-draft. And if you're the Raiders, Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell are not your quarterback of the future. If it's not this year, it's next year. You're going to have a young quarterback who then your number one priority will be getting that young quarterback along to where you think you can win a Super Bowl. And I don't think having a 73-year-old coach being the guy to usher in a young quarterback and try to get him along is the best setup. I think if I'm one of those teams, or if I'm any team with a young quarterback that I'm trying to, mold into a franchise guy, I'm going for a younger guy. I'm going for an offensive mind. Not that Pete Carroll's not, but at 73, that doesn't seem like a long-term answer. That seems like a 3-4 year answer. If I have one of those guys, I think it's going to be my quarterback for a decade. I want a head coach that's going to be my coach for a decade. I just think that, when you're hiring a coach like Pete Carroll, you're basically signing yourself up for coaching turnover within the next 5 years. And I just don't think that's a recipe for success.
Yeah, with all of, the coaching changes that the Bears have had, I think signing a short-term answer at this very moment wouldn't make a ton of sense to me. But, the other side, the flip side of that coin is I do think Pete Carroll would win games. So if you're trying to win right now, if you're trying to win tomorrow, then, maybe I roll with Pete Carroll and see if we can get 2 to 3 winning seasons with him before he hangs it up again. And you'd have to find a new head coach. There's always two sides to that coin. So if the Bears went that route, I don't hate Pete Carroll. I think Pete Carroll's a pretty damn good football coach. He's old, and if you want a short-term answer, then do your thing, Chicago Bears. Let's see if it works out for you for the first time.
The reason I'm a big Pete Carroll fan is because he's a head coach. And what I mean by that is he's not being brought in to call and run the offense. He's not being brought in to run the defense. He's being brought in, a veteran of his experience, to run the football team. And I think the NFL lacks a lot of guys like that. I don't think the NFL has many guys anymore that are head coaches. We talk about this all the time about, Zach Taylor needs to give up play calling responsibilities to go focus on being a head coach. The problem is so many teams have great offensive coordinators, and the only way to keep your offensive coordinator is to give him a promotion to being a head coach that he may not be a good head coach. Like Ben Johnson, we don't know if he'll be a good head coach, but my goodness, he's going to be reached out to by every team like we've seen the last couple of years. We have no clue. We know he can call an offense, but can he run a team? Well, call a team or run a team be damned. We know he can call an offense, and that's how we're going to get him over here. What I like about Pete Carroll is Pete Carroll's going to come in to be a head coach, and he'll find somebody to run this offense. He'll find somebody to run that defense and be a head coach. We don't see that too often anymore in the NFL, and I think that still holds some value. But you're right. You're hiring him knowing you get a short window, like a Terry Francona run, if you will. I don't know if you want that with Caleb Williams. You need someone that you want to build that rapport with moving forward.
If a team like Cincinnati would have moved off Zach Taylor, I think Pete Carroll will be perfect for that situation. If the Bills a year ago when McDermott was talked about on the hot seat, I think Pete Carroll would have been great for that situation. I think established elite quarterbacks and offenses, Pete Carroll would be perfect because exactly what Elliott said. He will get you a winning season. He's a winner. He'll get you over the top. But I would like to pair a young guy with a young guy. I just think for longevity reasons, having stability in the coaching space is so important for young quarterbacks.
And how about the Raiders? I heard on Colin's show yesterday, talking about the fact that, we talk about teams being so cheap with money at times. The Raiders, when they hire their next head coach, they'll be paying 4 head coaches. They're still paying John Gruden. They're paying Josh McDaniels still. Now they're paying Antonio Pierce for the remainder of his contract, and then whoever they pay to come in to be the next head coach. 4 head coaches on the payroll, and you don't have a quarterback. And Tom Brady doesn't own the team. He's a partial owner of the team. Yeah. Like this idea that the Raiders are getting this back on the track, this isn't a good start. Not a good start. They
Does anyone else
GM too?
Does anyone else think it's a little bit crazy that Tom Brady's very clearly calling shots for an NFL organization while also broadcasting games every week and voting for AP awards? Anyone else think that's just a little bit weird?
No conflict of interest whatsoever.
Yeah. Not sure how big of a fan I am of that. And by the way, Brady will be announcing the Super Bowl this year.
They did say it does appear like, and I think everybody in the landscape of broadcasting expects Tom Brady to not be on the call next year. You and I think Jacob Reed and I have been talking about it this week at times. He's been terrible this year. He hasn't been good. He hasn't felt comfortable. The bits that he does, the LFG award or whatever he's given out, it feels forced. And to be quite honest, I don't know what how many people Fox had to fire to make that deal happen, paying him $1 billion to call games. But Greg Olson's a far better broadcaster, and Tom Brady, it's time to hang up the cleats when it comes to calling NFL games.
Hang up the headset.
Yeah, it's over.
LFG, let's effing go, baby. There you go. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kidder, Jacob Tissett, Elliott Rearing with you here. Again, off the bench. We'll step away for a few moments. Let's talk about last night. Again, Notre Dame coming away with the huge semifinal win over Penn State. Marcus Freeman and company punched their ticket to the national championship game, where they'll await to take on the winner between Ohio State and Texas later on tonight. Marcus Freeman, I think we're all very familiar with him, has a lot of ties to the Dayton area here, obviously to the Cincinnati Bearcat program, a lot of local ties Buckeye. Here in some capacity. But in Buckeye, yes, holy smokes, yes, my bad.
Play linebacker.
Yes. So with all that being said, very cool from a local perspective to see Marcus Freeman punch his ticket to the national championship game. But I do have a question. He was an assistant to Luke Fickell, who takes the Wisconsin job. With the success of Marcus Freeman, does that put more pressure on Luke Fickell to succeed in 2025? Is it weird to see your assistants going on to have more success than you when you took that next big job? Is this adding pressure to Luke Fickell's run in Wisconsin? We'll talk about the semifinal. We'll talk about Luke Fickell and Marcus Freeman. We'll talk about all of that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. All right, and we are back. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here, 1410 ESPN Radio in Dayton, and of course, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. So 1410 ESPN Radio in Dayton. We are Dayton's radio home for Ohio State football, and Ohio State has Texas coming up later on tonight. 6 o'clock coverage begins, 7:30 the kickoff, and of course, the winner of Ohio State-Texas will go on to face Notre Dame in the national championship. Of course, the inaugural 12-team college football playoff national championship. And Ohio State, ironically enough, 10 years ago, won the very first 14-team college football playoff national title, of course. And can they do it for the first 12-team college football playoff? But they have to get through Texas first, and they have to face the team that won last night over Penn State in Notre Dame in a close one. Finally, seeing some close matchups here in this playoff, right? I don't know if that trend will continue tonight or not, but how about Notre Dame? How about Marcus Freeman? A lot to unpack from last night's win. It was exactly what you expected, by the way. Everything went as we expected. It wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing game. You could say it's two hard-hitting defenses. I think it's two very good defenses with subpar offenses. I think when you get those that recipe there, it's going to lead to a hard-hitting, not so aesthetically pleasing game, and that's what happened last night. And then you also got Penn State and James Franklin doing what they do in big games. I thought I saw like they're 1-15 against AP top 5 teams, 4-20.
And just because of a blocked field goal, they only have that one win because of a BS blocked field goal. Let's make that very clear.
And then like 4-20 record against top 10 opponents, and so that continues as well. You brought up a good point earlier, Jacob. Like I don't think Elliot. I think you asked the question about James Franklin in the hot seat. I don't think his seat's hot at all. I do think, though, this just continues to add to that narrative. I was on Casey's side not too long ago about the seat getting really hot for James Franklin, mainly because I was like, man, you can't continue to underperform. But Penn State's not Ohio State. Ohio State has expectations that you can't perform like that. That's why Ryan Day, the lunatic fringe that Kirk Herbstreit was mentioning, I don't think that was a fair assessment, only because we expect Ryan Day and Ohio State to beat top 5, top 10 caliber teams, and that just wasn't being done up until around this point more consistently. So, no, but then I've transitioned over to your side because Penn State, there is no expectation. Like they're happy that they got to the semifinal. They're happy that they got 2 playoff wins. They're financially happy too because that was a nice little payout. So, yeah, I don't think his seat's warm at all, but it just adds to that narrative. And those numbers continue to pile up. 1-15 against top 5 teams, 4-20 against top 10 teams. Penn State is who they are. They're the 3rd to 4th best team in the Big Ten every year. They're going to recruit very well. They're going to be ranked high every year in preseason, and they're going to underperform in the regular season. And I don't think they would have got to the Final Four if they didn't have such a friendly seed to begin with. But kudos to them for getting there. But it's wild just seeing how this narrative continuously rolls out year in and year out for James Franklin and the Nittany Lions.
I think even more important than beating SMU and Boise State, and granted that is just because it's who they played. Usually I would say getting to the semifinal is what saved James Franklin's job. But in my opinion, what saved James Franklin's job is how this team looked against Oregon in the Big Ten championship. You have a gift handed to you in Ohio State losing to Michigan. You get a trip to Indianapolis that you nor your fans expected to have this season. And it started off pretty poor, but you put up a great fight. And you played maybe your best game of the entire season up until Boise in the second round when you absolutely annihilated them. But I think showing that fight in the conference championship at the peak of the Big Ten, which is what Penn State has been fighting to get to for so long. We can talk about national championships and all that stuff a lot, but I don't think James Franklin and that team were locked in on a national championship first and foremost. I think it was getting to the Big Ten championship, winning that was their first goal, because that's how you can prove that you're on that same level as an Ohio State and a Michigan. Even if you can't hoist the trophy at the end of the year, they proved that they had a good point this season, a good standing in the conference this season against Oregon, and I just think that is what saved his job. And that's kind of why I had the same sentiment going into the playoffs, because that game had obviously already happened. And I think once you put up that fight and you get to that point, he had proven that he can at least hang around. And I think this format has benefited him more than anyone else in all of college football, because they would have been in much more often than not over the years. And then how often are we even talking about him not winning big games if he's consistently in the quarter and semifinal of the 12-team playoff? Again, not beating great teams. They didn't beat a single good team this year, but they They were in the semifinal and they were in the Big Ten championship. So I think that's plenty enough for him to earn a little bit more respect, if not in Happy Valley, at least outside of it. And I think we all know that fans of certain teams can be a little bit quick to pull the trigger on coaches. So I think the national media and everyone else's opinion certainly holds a little bit more weight, at least when you're gauging how hot seats are for college coaches. If you just focus on Penn State fans, I'm sure a lot more of them would say to fire James Franklin. But I know some Ohio State fans that were crazy enough to say they should fire Ryan Day before this playoff. So I think you got to look at everyone else's take on it. And I think most people are respecting James Franklin a little bit more. The one thing I do think could potentially warm up his seat is those pregame comments, the Marcus Freeman age thing, the conference thing. He put a lot of weight into winning this game. He talked a little bit more. Yeah, he talked a little bit more than I thought he should have or would have. So I think that might be a conversation point of this offseason, but I think James Franklin's fine.
Yeah, I think that, it kind of goes back to what Justin just said, but what are the expectations for Penn State fans? And if your expectations are to win championships, I don't think you'll ever get there with James Franklin. But if your expectations are to be competitive every single year, then you're going to get that under James Franklin. So do you want to move on from that? It's you're going to get a sure thing of getting to the quarterfinals, maybe getting to the semifinals, maybe winning a home playoff game every single year. Because you're probably never going to win the Big Ten, so you would never get the automatic bye if those stick around. You have a good chance to host playoff games, win a couple of them, fight in the semifinal, and if you lose, you lose. But you can't say it's a failed season. They've had a good season.
Yeah.
I know they haven't played anybody in the playoff outside of Notre Dame, but I do think you have to give them a little bit of credit in the fact that, they've showed up when they've needed to every single time, really. I mean, you can look back at the Oregon loss, and Jacob said it. They fought in that game last night against Notre Dame. I would argue if it wasn't for truly one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen, they might have still won that game. So, I think Penn State isn't going to move on from him until they get to a point where he's not consistently in a spot to win playoff games, the first round at least.
I do think something that's saving Franklin as well in a lot of this conversation is how poor the offense looked. I think it's tough to blame a coach when you have Drew Aller throwing across his body into triple coverage. I know he gets bailed out of two really, really bad interceptions, and then the one at the end of the game, I mean, he owed Notre Dame one. So I'm glad he gave him one at the end of the game because PI and a hold, which both were the right call, at least by letter of the law, and Notre Dame got the short end of the stick there, but Aller 12 of 23 for 135 yards, no touchdowns and an interception, not a single completion to wide receivers. I think that might be a big indictment on James Franklin as well. How do you go into the season with a quarterback you believe in and a defense you believe in and say, we're not going to get you any legitimate wide receivers? You have Tyler Warren, who's great with the ball in his hands, but not a single receiver on Penn State caught a ball last night. And I just don't know how you even get to the semifinals with a receiving room that bad. But I think they really have to look at roster construction as well as they go into next year.
Especially when you put 20-plus points up, with that being the case, too. That's also pretty impressive. The only indictment against James Franklin as well, it's, you think back Ohio State, 10-0 lead against the Buckeyes. You lose that game. You had a double-digit lead against Notre Dame last night. You lose that game. Those are the things that – but luckily it was a close one. It was a close game, so that definitely helps. You didn't get blown out when it's all said and done. But
Jacob,
so Notre Dame –
Jacob, real quick.
What's up?
When he threw that interception on the defensive hold, did he see the flag before he threw that football? Was that a free play or was that luck?
If it would have been an encroachment or a defensive offsides, I would have said yes, but I don't think you take a free play shot in that situation on a hold, if that makes sense. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, to throw that ball up on a defensive hold in that situation. It was a terrible throw, and he wasn't open. There was no window to really put that in, and it was even worse on the other one that was called back for PI. I already said I thought both were a good call. What did you think about both the hold and the pass interference on those interceptions? Obviously kept Penn State in the game probably a little longer than they should have been.
I didn't like the pass interference. I thought the pass interference, though I do think it might technically be the definition of the penalty. I don't think it affected the play as much as the defensive hold maybe could have. either way, I mean, if I were a ref in that situation, I would have never thrown the flag.
I think the hold was pretty clear. He had him around the shoulder pad. Yeah. He kind of pulled him down. I don't think anyone's really arguing about that one. The big conversation point is the second across the body pass interference when Aller was targeting Tyler Warren. And I think they should change the rule. I think that is pass interference by every letter of the law, and I just personally think that they should change the rule. I think underthrows and plays like that, like Elliot said, that don't affect the outcome of the play should be treated very similarly as tipped passes. If a pass is tipped at the line of scrimmage, then it's automatically not pass interference downfield. I think if the ball is underthrown by 3 or 5 yards or whatever it was in that situation into triple coverage, quarterbacks shouldn't be rewarded for that. But in the current era that we live in, with the current rules we play under, they certainly are. So I'm not gonna argue against that one, but I certainly agree with you. I think college football and all football would be a better sport if you're not rewarding underthrows.
You know, it's funny, throughout this entire playoff run, we haven't heard much about officiating. There hasn't been many, controversial calls, but that's because there's been so many blowouts, and it's not a coincidence that you get a close, highly contested game like this one, a chance to get to the national championship on the line, and we're talking about some controversial calls or questionable calls, and you see that a lot more. Ohio State fans are known for blaming refs for everything more than any other fan base out there. They haven't been put in that position because they're blowing everybody out. If it's a close game tonight,
if you want to let me complain about the refs, I will.
Trust me. There's always, you will find reasons.
Ohio State's outside the top 150 in opponent penalties, so their opponent hasn't been called for a hold since the start of Big Ten play the first week of September. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Ohio against the world, baby. They're all out to get them.
That's right.
The biggest ratings draw in the playoff. They're doing everything they can to keep them out. That's why I always tell people, I'm like, look, they're not out after Ohio State. If anything, they want Ohio State. They're a draw. No one's trying to keep them out. From that. No, but you're right.
Speaking of that, during some early calls in the Notre Dame Penn State game, our good friend Jimmy Collins texted me and said, this one's rigged for Penn State. I said, Jimmy, with all due respect, if they're going to rig this game, they're going to rig it for Notre Dame. I don't think anyone needs rocket science to determine that one. Notre Dame and Ohio State would be a ratings bonanza in the national championship.
Everyone thinks everyone's out to get this.
That's right. That's the fun thing about sports. The refs and the leagues are out to get actually every single team.
Look, Jimmy thought that they were out to get Notre Dame. That they were trying. We don't want Notre Dame, one of the biggest draws in college sports. We want Penn State.
It was in the heat of the battle. It was in the heat of the battle. We all say some things that we don't necessarily mean. I'll cut him some slack. I got a good chuckle out of it.
I can't wait to bring Jimmy back on to do the Reds starting lineup this next year. Shout out to Jimmy, by the way. I miss Jimmy's starting lineups for Reds baseball, and we're getting closer to that. But there you go.
That's the one part about officiating that people don't really talk about, is that, it's always going to be bad, but you always get an excuse when you lose. It's a free excuse.
That's right.
No robots here. Just let the guys mess up on their own. So we'll always have the refs wronged us.
I am with you there. If you take away my ability to blame the refs, what do we have left? Is it my fault? Are other players not good enough? That's not an option. I need to be able to blame the refs.
Last night again, you have Notre Dame knock off Penn State. So Notre Dame is in the national championship game. Marcus Freeman, from Dayton, played at Ohio State, assistant coach with the Bearcats under Luke Fickell. Now the head coach for the Fighting Irish, and he has them in just a couple years into his run there in the national championship game, which is pretty cool. I like Marcus Freeman. He's very hard to not root for. Notre Dame's always a team I always root against just because I might get in the conference. It drives me nuts, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, I've always been conflicted when it comes to being anti-Notre Dame for something, because I'm a big fan of Marcus Freeman, who has had some bumps in the road. There's been the tough losses against Marshall, losing to Northern Illinois earlier in the season. But to continue, I think this is the most impressive coaching job. After losing to Northern Illinois, you might as well have just packed your bags and said, we have no chance of making the playoff. This will be the worst loss of the season, no doubt about it, and it still is. But for him to get his team to continue to buy in and just dominate teams the rest of the way, to not let that hangover impact the rest of their season, I think Marcus Freeman did a hell of a coaching job this year. And it's pretty cool seeing a former Bearcat assistant coach goes on to Notre Dame and leads them to the national title game, replacing a guy who left Cincinnati back in the day, who also left Notre Dame because he didn't feel there was enough resources there to win a national championship. And here we are, a couple years into Freeman's run, and already has him in the national title game.
Yeah, I think Marcus Freeman, not only is he a great football coach and obviously wins a lot of games, he outcoached Kirby Smart 2 games ago, and that obviously means a lot. He's the guy at the pinnacle of the sport right now, and that kind of jolted Marcus Freeman into that conversation. And then obviously to do it again, have a great performance last night against Penn State really does cement him there. And I think even outside of coaching between the lines, Marcus Freeman's done something that is really, really hard to do, and Brian Kelly certainly never did. He's made a lot of people like Notre Dame. And I think that means a lot. I mean, Notre Dame's very widely hated by anyone that's not a Notre Dame fan. I think that's the case with most of the big brands in all of sports. If you're not a fan of that team, you hate the big brand. And for some reason, Marcus Freeman has had the ability to pick up a lot of fans. And a lot of people really like him. And I know I'm certainly one that hated Notre Dame most of my life. But as soon as Marcus Freeman got there and I got to hear him talk to the media a few times, I've hopped on the bandwagon. And I don't know how long he's going to be in South Bend. I mean, with the competitor that he is, going to the next level of the sport certainly does mean a lot, I would assume, to any great coach. And Marcus Freeman certainly is cementing his name as a star in the coaching ranks. And I wouldn't be shocked if the NFL comes calling at some point. But in terms of Luke Fickell, I certainly think that it would be a little bit of an added pressure to see an assistant take the steps Freeman has while you've struggled immensely at Wisconsin. It hasn't just been that he hasn't made the playoff and Freeman's made a national championship. Fickell's been outright bad. He's underperformed expectations basically every step of the way. He's had decent portal recruiting and decent high school recruiting, but outside of that, it hasn't translated to wins. And I know Tyler Van Dyke got hurt this year against Alabama early in the season, and maybe that's an excuse to give him a little bit of a longer leash next year, but I just don't think this Wisconsin team is trending in the direction most people in Cincinnati or Madison thought it would with the hire of Luke Fickell. We were all high on him when he left Cincinnati, but he just hasn't worked out, and I think this definitely does add pressure, but I don't know how much more pressure can be on him. I mean, when he was hired, he was the biggest name on the market, or one of the biggest names on the market, and he's been an outright failure with a lot of money they tied up there. So I don't know how much longer he's going to have at Wisconsin if he can't turn it around pretty quickly, and the Freeman debacle certainly doesn't help.
Yeah, I that's my guy, Luke Fickell. But when he left UC the way he did, I will say I'm not rooting against him, but I'm certainly not rooting for the Wisconsin football program. This season, their schedule is brutal. I wish them all the luck in the world, but it's looking like the Luke Fickell experiment is going to come to a close real soon. We have a couple super chats. I'm going to get them in before I forget.
Oh, I think you only read a couple of them.
That's correct. Justin Edgel, $4.99. Marcus Freeman is the best coach on college football, not on college football. Thank you. Fight me. And then Mark Fetter says $5, go Bucks. And then there was another one that I can't read.
Look, I've been adamant about this. I still think you better be nice to Luke Fickell there, Elliot, because I think he's going to be your next head coach with the Bearcats. I thought the parallels between Scott Frost and Luke Fickell have always been very similar. Look, Scott Frost took UCF to heights that you wouldn't expect in the American Conference at the time, and led them to undefeated records. They didn't get to the playoff. They go on to a bowl game. They beat Auburn. They claimed to be national champions, which drove me nuts, but that's an argument for another day. But we saw him go and take the Nebraska job, and then Luke Fickell, very similarly in the American Conference, does great things with Cincinnati. This time, getting them to the playoff. And he takes the Wisconsin job. Scott Frost fell on his face at Nebraska. Luke Fickell's doing it at Wisconsin. We just saw Scott Frost go back and take the UCF job. I think that's pretty cool, and I think that's going to be the fate for Luke Fickell when it's all said and done. Because Satterfield's back for another year. I don't think the Bearcats are going to take that next step forward that you're wanting to see, and I think that the timing just seems to work out perfect. And now, and look, maybe the Bearcats say, hey, we don't want to go back the Fickell route, but if Fickell's available and he's had success there, I'd have a hard time believing that the Bearcats wouldn't be semi-interested in reuniting with Luke Fickell if that situation plays out as is. Because you brought up that schedule. You're right, Elliot. It's a tough schedule for Wisconsin. Things aren't trending in a positive direction for him. I mean, and look, it's tough to make excuses. You look at what Curt Cignetti did at Indiana. Indiana's the losingest program in the history of college football. And in one season, in one offseason, in 1 year where you fill that roster with transfer portal players, and you get them to the playoff, and yet Wisconsin fans are being told, well, you got to be patient. He's building his program. I don't think patience exists as much in today's college athletics when you have, as much as the portal is a pain in the ass, it's also a resource that you can reach around if you hit on enough players. So I think the pressure is through the roof for Luke Fickell. And I definitely think watching a guy like Marcus Freeman, who was his assistant, take Notre Dame to the national title game, I definitely think that adds more pressure to Luke Fickell when it's all said and done.
Freeman went to Notre Dame prior to Fickell going to Wisconsin, correct? Yeah. Okay. That would have been an incredibly tough pill to swallow if that had been a different order and you had let Freeman walk out of the building. But at least he was gone already, because he's an elite coach. I mean, he's absolutely incredible. He's recruiting at a level we haven't really seen at Notre Dame. He's done a really good job. I know there's been some big time decommits lately, but I think he's doing a really, really good job there. He's having success with the portal. Riley Leonard's been successful, and their kicker last night was a portal guy as well from South Carolina. So he's done an awesome job kind of adapting what Notre Dame is and making Brian Kelly out to be a liar, which is always fun to see.
All right, this is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here, 1410 ESPN Radio in Dayton, and, of course, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. We'll step away for a few moments. Ohio State, Texas. We'll discuss that when we come back, and then we'll give you our NFL playoff bold predictions as that officially kicks off this weekend. And then a little buy or sell action as we wrap the week up here on a very busy week on Off the Bench. Definitely one of our most listened to and most viewed weeks we've had in quite some time, and we appreciate all you guys for hanging out with us throughout the week, especially with all the snow and everyone just hanging out at home. Glad everyone decided to hang out with us this week. We'll be right back. More Off the Bench next. Cool. All right, Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wingham in Dayton. This is what we like to call, or Elliot, who brought the lingo, brought the hip new radio lingo to the show. A little touch and go. We got Ohio State, Texas. We're going to dive into when we come back. Buy or sell. Let's throw out some of these buy or sells just to be thinking about it. Buy or sell the Cincinnati Bengals making a splash defensive coordinator hire. Buy or sell. How about Ohio State winning by double digits tonight? Buy or sell. The idea of that happening is the Chicago Bears. They have the best head coaching vacancy in the NFL right now. Buy or sell. Plus, what's the chances of both one seeds in the NFC and AFC making it to the Super Bowl? Buy or sell that happening. We'll get to all of that. We have a busy second hour coming up next. More Off the Bench when we return. All right, and we are back. This is Off the Bench, hour number 2 for our listeners in Dayton. Almost hour number 2 for our viewers on YouTube, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here. Happy Friday. college football playoff semifinal action. The second matchup tonight, Texas and Ohio State, 7:30 the kickoff, 6 o'clock. Is when coverage will begin for that one on 1410 ESPN Radio in Dayton. Of course, last night, Notre Dame, 27-24, the final over Penn State. Marcus Freeman and company now, as they punch their ticket to the national championship game, they'll spend the next 10 days sitting back and preparing for either Texas or Ohio State. They're going to be, look, it's going to be a great national championship matchup from a brand's perspective. But guys, as we kick this little segment off right here before we get to Ohio State and Texas, what's the most intriguing matchup? Notre Dame against Texas or Notre Dame against Ohio State? I know we lightly touched on it this week, but now that we know Notre Dame's in the national title game, which is the more intriguing matchup, do you think?
I think for quite some time now, the most intriguing matchup in the national championship has been a Notre Dame Ohio State. I think maybe even prior to the Michigan game, that was one of the most intriguing matchups in the entire country. Ohio State was playing great following the Oregon loss early in the season. Notre Dame played great following the Northern Illinois loss early in the season. Two teams that were peaking right before the playoffs. I think we've kind of been on a collision course for this one for a while. This Notre Dame team's playing great on defense. Riley Leonard's doing enough for them to win, and Ohio State's peaking in the playoffs. So I think these two teams, two of the biggest fan bases, two of the biggest brands in all of college football, I think it's a no-doubter that Ohio State and Notre Dame is the most desirable national championship game.
I think Ohio State Notre Dame is, and Jacob said it, I think a while ago, that it was going to be the better game. I think Notre Dame's defense is going to give Ohio State the biggest fight. So I like Notre Dame winning last night. I liked Ohio State. I like Ohio State winning tonight against Texas. You said, are they going to win by 2 scores? I won't do that now. I won't give my answer now, but I love it. So I will give my answer now. I absolutely love it. And I do think that it will be a somewhat close game. You'd be a fool to not take Ohio State to win the championship at this very second.
Minus 150.
I don't want to watch Texas. I don't want to watch Texas. So I'll root for Ohio State, Notre Dame, the battle of the villains, and we'll see who comes out on top.
I think Ohio State has sorry, go ahead, Kenner.
Oh, no, all I was going to say is, I think, piggybacking off some of the things you guys have said, look, I think the brand matchup of Notre Dame and Ohio State is through the roof. But again, if Ohio State plays the way they did against Tennessee and Oregon and how some are expecting them to play against Texas, we saw Notre Dame's the deficiencies really offensively. How dominant has the defense of Notre Dame been? Or is it going up against a Georgia offense that struggled with, obviously since going to the backup? You get Penn State, who's not a juggernaut offensively. You played Indiana in the first round. Yes, this is a great defense and how they look at Notre Dame, but you also got to consider who a backup quarterback at Georgia, Indiana, and then, of course, an inept offense in Penn State. They look great defensively. Is that more of a product of who they've played? This offense that Notre Dame would play in Ohio State, I think is going to lead to a potential blowout. And I think that's what would lead to a better game is watching Notre Dame take on Texas. I think that would be the closer matchup, but I want to watch Ohio State go up against Marcus Freeman and the Fighting Irish. I think that there's just a lot of built-in storylines. And I promise you, we're going to talk about the coaching future of Marcus Freeman. How much longer will he be at Notre Dame, the NFL possibly? I think for the first time in a while, I think we feel pretty confident who the Buckeyes' next head coach will be down the road. Finally, Ohio State has a good candidate that's proven it already with Marcus Freeman. We'll see. But I like both matchups.
Yeah, the look-ahead line for Ohio State against Notre Dame in the national championship is 7.5 for Ohio State, over a touchdown in the national championship for Ohio State. And this has me thinking back to 2022 when Ohio State lost to Michigan and had a chance against Georgia to go play TCU in the national championship. Ohio State cannot piss down their leg and lose this game to Texas. They have to go on and win the national championship this year. They have a chance. They have an easy matchup against Notre Dame. They would roll Notre Dame in the national championship, just like they would have rolled TCU a couple of years ago. But they lost to Georgia in the semifinal, and they lost that opportunity. Ohio State has to win the game tonight because they have an opportunity to hoist the trophy. They're an over a touchdown favorite. You would win that game. You have to win tonight. You can't lose to Texas. You're a 6-point favorite, 7 depending on where you look. Some places still have it at 5.5. If you can find any of those lines, take them. Ohio State's not gonna, miss this opportunity. They know what's in front of them. They know how big of a favorite they'll be over Notre Dame, and they know that they have a national championship basically in their hands that only they can cost themselves. So if Ohio State doesn't turn the ball over, if Ohio State plays Buckeye football, they're going to be all right. And they're going to beat Texas, and they're going to go on and they're going to beat Notre Dame. And I think Ohio State recognizes what's in front of them here, and they remember what happened with C.J. Stroud, Marvin Harrison, and all those guys against Georgia after TCU had beat Michigan, and you knew you had a national championship in your hands, and you lost to Georgia. They're not going to do that again. They're going to beat Texas, and they're going to take care of business in the national championship. They know what's in front of them. They know how easy this should be.
When they lost to Michigan, there was a switch that was flipped, and say whatever you want about Ryan Day, say he can't ever beat Michigan, say he can't win the big one. I think this year he's going to win the big one. And I think this year, I don't know, Jacob gives his takes all the time. Once Ryan Day lifts up the national championship trophy presented by Dr. Pepper.
That's right.
whenever he lifts that up, mid-hoist, he wants Ryan Day fired in that moment. I'll say this, the talent that he brings in, how good this team looks right now, you have to credit Ryan Day a lot, and I'll defend Ryan Day. After the Michigan game, I think I was texting Jacob, no way you can bring this guy back. But they've looked absolutely unbelievable during this playoff run. We'll see how they look tonight, because if they beat Texas by a good 25, 30 points tonight, I mean, there's no reason that guy's not there, the long-term head coach of Ohio State. And it's why you don't opt out of the playoff because you lose to Michigan, because you get to show that your team is pretty damn good given the circumstances. I don't know why they didn't throw the football against Michigan. I don't understand why they didn't figure that one out. But outside of that game, throw that game away. I know it sucks to say, but it's Jason Fitz came on our show earlier this week and said it. That game needs to stop being as much as it is to Ohio State fans. I know it's hard to say, but if you have to weigh a championship and beating Michigan, the championship should and always be ranked higher in the minds of Ohio State fans, and it's looking pretty damn good. Now, I will say, if they lose tonight, you lose the national championship against Notre Dame, it's a different story, but I've seen no inkling of weakness from Ohio State up until this moment.
I 100% agree, and I think that's why a lot of us, though Ryan Day has been rolling and has Ohio State looking great, a lot of us that wanted him fired and maybe jumped the gun on that, I'm willing to admit that, but a lot of us that wanted that, we feel vindicated, even though they look great, because the reason we were so fed up with Ryan Day after that Michigan game is because we all knew they could do this. We knew they had the talent. We knew they could roll really good teams, and Michigan's far from a great team, but we knew they could roll really good teams, and they just weren't showing it. They weren't playing their best, and I didn't know who to blame other than Ryan Day. I think Chip Kelly really took control of that Michigan game. Obviously, we'll never really know what happens, but when you run the ball that much, I think I'm going to put the onus of that on the offensive coordinator that's known for running the ball and not the head coach that's known for throwing it. So I think Chip probably said, hey, Ryan Day, you've lost to Michigan 3 times in a row. Let me take control here. And he did, and they ran the ball, and it didn't work. And I think now Ryan Day and Chip Kelly have married his passing game and Chip's run game, and it looks unbelievable as we're playing right now. And hopefully that can continue against Texas and then against Notre Dame.
Yeah, that's the thing about Ryan Day, too, and I remember – the emphasis of the Michigan game. I remember we talked about this in the offseason. We talked about this the week of I remember the week of the Michigan game while everyone was hyping it up. I said, hey, I'm not trying to discredit this Michigan game, but it's a big game, but Penn State's a big game. Texas in week 1 of next year's a big game. Tonight's a big game. It's all about winning big games. And to say that Michigan is the biggest game of all of those, any game that you win to put you in a position to win a national championship is a big game, but it's not the only the only game. I told you after they lost to Georgia a few years ago in the semifinal, Ryan Day did an interview about a month after and said, hey, looking back on the season, how do you, what are your thoughts on the loss to Georgia, Michigan, blah, blah, blah. He went on to say, and I'm paraphrasing, but he did use the words not being able to sleep at night about Michigan loss. He goes, he still thinks about the Georgia loss, but he still is losing sleep over the Michigan loss. And I said, that's asinine. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard anyone say, because losing to Michigan, it cost you a Big Ten title, but didn't keep you out of the playoff, and it didn't keep you from having a chance to win a national title.
Couldn't you argue it did? Because you would have played TCU in the first round?
I mean, they still would have played Georgia in the finals, and it could have been the same result.
I guess you're right.
But here's why. Because, by the way, they could have lost to Georgia by more than a possession, and then we could have said, see, you had an easier path but they didn't struggle with Georgia from an offensive standpoint. They couldn't stop anybody, which was their problem against Michigan to begin with. But my point was, you make a field goal, you get one stop. Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't go out with the concussion. Any of those things happen, you win a national championship with the loss against Michigan, but you're saying, hey, the loss to Michigan is what keeps you up at night. That's ridiculous to me. So he has a chance to prove that this year. 4 straight losses. Ross Bjork, the athletic director, coming out and saying, hey, we got to change our approach to how we view and talk about this Michigan game, and I agree 100%. Right away, you got the whole he doesn't get it. That's okay. They don't need to get it. I don't need to get it. I just want my team to get a national championship, and they're well on their way to potentially doing that. Jake, you're also right, too, about I heard Kirk Herbstreit say, yeah, I feel like all the Ryan Day doubters, they're very quiet right now. And I'm like, no, they're as you said, they're vindicated.
Yeah.
If anything, the Tennessee game and Oregon game, that just proves everyone's point to begin with. Where the hell was this? Where was this against Oregon the first time? Where was this against Michigan? They beat Penn State, but they didn't steamroll Penn State. They didn't dominate anybody this year in regards to teams of substance. Indiana, yeah, they pulled away late, and they did pound them pretty good, let's be real. But at the same time, they didn't bludgeon Indiana. If they played Indiana today, I think it's scary what that score would be, to be quite honest with you. This was the Ohio State team everyone was waiting to see from week one. That was not the case. For 3.5 months, we did not see this Buckeye team play to the level of what we expected them to. They dominated Tennessee. They dominated Oregon. We'll see if that trend continues tonight. Do you see that trend continuing tonight? Do they pick it up, or do they revert back to old habits?
I think they're going to pick it up. I think that Michigan loss is what kind of kicked Ryan Day in the backside and said, you better lock in and get this team to play to their potential, and that's what he's done for the last 2 games, and it means a lot. I mean, we know how much of a big deal it is to win this championship for Ryan Day and for the Ohio State fan base, losing to Michigan, not winning the Big Ten championship. This is all we have left to hang our hats on for a year with a $20+ million roster and some of the most talent we've ever had in Columbus on a given season. So hopefully they can get it done. I expect it to continue tonight, and then we'll see what happens against Notre Dame. But Sean Connor puts a question in the chat. We talked about it a lot going into the Tennessee game, a little bit less going into the Oregon game, and then almost not at all going into this Texas game. But Sean Connor says no one is concerned about the Ohio State offensive line in this matchup. Texas has a great defensive line. Tennessee and Oregon did as well, but Ohio State's dealing with a lot of injuries. There's no way around that. Their Remington Award-winning best center in the country, Seth McLaughlin, out for the year. Their starting left tackle, potential first-round pick, Josh Simmons, out for the year. And I would be much more concerned about this if they wouldn't have completely shut down an Oregon and a Tennessee D-line. This makeshift group of players has been maybe the best defensive line in this playoff. So until they give me a reason to not believe in them, I'm going to continue to rock with this offensive line, and I think they're doing a really, really good job. The other thing I wanted to bring up about this matchup tonight, Texas and Ohio State, we talked about it a lot last night, the quarterbacks, Drew Aller and Riley Leonard, neither of them world beaters, but we believed in Drew Aller a lot more than Leonard tonight. 2 flawed quarterbacks as well. Quinn Ewers certainly has his shortcomings, and Will Howard, we've talked about a lot, probably a product of the talent and scheme around him in terms of his success this year. Our dear friend Emmanuel Acho had a take on this that I wanted to bring up here, and I can't blame him. He has a lot going on, probably hasn't been able to watch a lot of the games, but he said Quinn has his flaws, but he is objectively better than Will. Hence why you offered him $1 million as a 17-year-old. Aller will be a first-round pick. Riley can run well. Will is just a guy with a really, really good offensive mind and 4 top 3 round skill players. Now, first and foremost, I don't think he lied anywhere in there. Aller will be a first-round pick. The Buckeyes did offer 17-year-old Quinn Ewers $1 million, and Riley Leonard can run. But I feel like those aren't the best arguments here. Quinn Ewers was offered $1 million as a 17-year-old kid. How many times have we seen 5-star number 1 overall players in recruiting classes fizzle out and not be what they were expected to be? So using high school recruiting to justify a player 5 years down the line does not make a lot of sense to me. Aller will be a first-round pick? Absolutely. Will Howard already beat him once this year, and we saw last night that where you're projected in the draft does not matter for whether or not you'll advance in the playoff. Riley Leonard can run well. Spoiler alert, so can Will Howard. So I think that's a relative wash there. And in terms of Will just being a guy with a really, really good offensive mind and 4 top 3 round skill players, he's been pretty dominant for just a guy in this playoff. 17 of 26 for 319 yards and 3 touchdowns against Oregon, and more of the same against Tennessee. 24-29 for 311 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. If that's just a guy, I'll take just a guy every single year.
All right, good stuff. Off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. By the way, shout out to Jacob for, of all weeks, using Emmanuel Acho to make a point today. So
Jacob had a lot of joy when saying that.
I did.
Ooh,
I did.
Nice.
I did.
Damn, I'm usually quicker with jokes. I can't think of one. The joy one was good.
That was
a good one. Joy is good. 518. Yeah, I was about to give out the phone number as if I'm doing my show. My bad. I was about to. Honestly, out of habit, I about gave out the phone number to call into the station. Can't do that here. My bad. All right, off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinder, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here. College football playoff semifinals tonight. Ohio State and Texas. The winner goes on to face Notre Dame in the national championship game. Also happening this weekend, the kickoff to NFL playoffs, and that's what we're going to pick up with when we come back. Our bold predictions for the NFL playoffs as that officially kicks off this weekend. We'll get to all of that when we come back. More off the bench next. All right, and we are back here on a Friday, off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here, heading into the weekend. College football playoff talk. We've spent the last couple of days on that. Shout out to Jason Fitz and, of course, Mike Golick Jr. hopping on this week to break down all the college football playoff action. And we now know Notre Dame's in the national title game. Now we wait to find out who they play. The winner of Texas and Ohio State. Semifinal action coming up later on tonight. More playoff action this weekend, this time in the National Football League. And as we sit here and prepare for some of these matchups, it got to a point where, and as you guys know, I don't know if you know this, I'm not a Bengals fan, but I've been so locked into the Bengals push down the stretch. When the playoffs got eliminated, when the Bengals got eliminated for the playoffs, and my team's been eliminated for weeks, I was like, season's done. I'm like, oh wait, no, it's kind of the most important time of the season. It's the playoffs. So, but yeah, a lot of intriguing games this coming up weekend. Wild card round, of course, obviously. Detroit, the 1 seed out of the NFC. They wrap that up. And then you look, of course, at the Kansas City Chiefs. Shocker, the 1 seed in the AFC. Nonetheless, we won't see them this weekend, but a lot of big playoff games coming up this weekend. And now it's time to give our NFL playoffs bold predictions. What are some bold predictions that you guys have in the chamber about this weekend coming up with great NFL playoff action?
I'll let you run with it, Elliot.
So I've got a couple, and I'm going to say this. We kind of alluded to it yesterday, my thoughts on this. I know the Fires might have put a damper on this, but I think if there was a wild card team that wasn't the Packers that were to make some sort of run, I think the Rams.
They're not a wild card team.
They've been. What's that?
They're not a wild card team.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. They
won the West.
You're right. You're right. I think if there was a team to make some noise in the postseason, I would pick the Rams. I think that though their defense is stinky, their offense with Matthew Stafford, with Puka, with Cooper Kupp, with Kyron, I do think's good enough to win one game at least, maybe 2 games, and maybe go on a little run. That's a team that I think not one single person in the world believes in at this moment, and that's a team I think could make a little bit of noise in the playoffs. The other bold predictions. The other bold prediction I would have is that, and again, I might be wrong on this one too, I do think the Steelers, though I don't believe in them, could potentially sneak by the Ravens. And if they get by the Ravens, I do think they're good enough to go on a little run. Excuse me. Sorry. I was battling that one in for 15 seconds.
You're good.
But I do think the Steelers, with as good of a defense as they have, I do think Russell Wilson's maybe capable of coming back to life for one, maybe 2 games, and you see a Pittsburgh Steelers run in the playoffs. Those are my 2 big ones. The other one I would mention is I do think the Chiefs have the possibility of losing in their first game for the first time in a while.
That's mine. That's my first one. And I know it might spoil a buy or sell for later, but my first bold prediction is the Chiefs lose in the divisional round. I think they lose their first game that they play in Arrowhead this year. And that's because I'm picking the Bills, the Ravens, and the Chargers. And now that changes a lot if somehow Denver's able to pull off an upset and they're headed to Kansas City. I don't think they're going to be able to pull off 2 crazy upsets in a row. But if that shakes out the way I'm predicting and the Chargers are headed to the Chiefs, I said it yesterday. I really believe in the Chargers. I think Justin Herbert is incredible. I believe in him reaching the ceiling that we've seen him touch a little bit more than almost anyone else in the quarterback landscape in the NFL, outside of the guys that obviously do it all the time, the Joe Burrows, the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons of the world. Herbert is right there after them in my mind in terms of how much I believe in him down the stretch here. So I think the Chiefs potentially losing in the first round, and then the Vikings, just to pick them, I thought that spread was going to be a little bit more, so I thought this would be a bolder prediction, but I'm on the Rams. Not quite as confident as Elliott is, but a 14-3 Vikings team, I think they're headed out in the first round. I think the Rams are going to get that win. I know the Vikings are the road team, or I guess now that they're playing in Arizona, technically the road team, but they are favored, so I'll consider that a bold prediction as well. Other than that, I think most of these games are going to be pretty chalk. I was excited to pick the Packers, but with Jalen Hurts coming out of concussion protocol, I just think there's too much talent on Philadelphia for them to lose in the first round. The one thing to monitor with them, A.J. Brown did not practice yesterday, so if A.J. Brown's not going to play, I might revert back and go on to the Packers. But a healthy Eagles team, I think they're just too strong. My bold predictions will be Chargers over Chiefs in the second round. Chiefs don't get a playoff win, and then the Rams can beat the Vikings.
So my bold prediction, we talked about it yesterday when we were doing our frauds and in our contender segment yesterday, but I don't know what it is. I'm rolling with Denver. I like Denver against the Eagles. It's a little bit of the trust factor that I think a lot of people lack when it comes to Josh Allen. Josh Allen has struggled against top 10 defenses in the national. Look, he struggled against the Ravens earlier in the year where he just had that game where he completely disappeared. When he's gone up against top defenses, he's been slowed down. I think that Denver is one of the best defenses in the National Football League. I like Denver's chances there. And then I just think I like the coaching. I like the coaching of the Broncos too. I think that what Peyton has done with the Broncos too is to have a rookie quarterback. He keeps his rookie quarterback from hurting himself. Now, we've seen some mistakes throughout, no doubt. But he's max. I don't know if there's many coaches in the NFL that can actually get the most out of Bo Nix as what we've seen him get out of him this season. And I think that this is going to be a huge opportunity for Peyton and the Broncos and Bo Nix to show that, okay, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with moving forward. I think the ghost of Josh Allen's past and his inability to be trusted in the playoffs, especially coming off of an MVP caliber season, sometimes you stop that regular season, it's a brand new season in the playoffs, and there's just something about they don't take that with them when the postseason gets here. I like Denver. I think the defense is top-notch, and I think that the defense is what carries teams at this time of year. Run the football, rely on your defense, allow Bo Nix to make timely plays like he's done all year, and ride what got you here. I think Denver pulls off an upset. That's my bold prediction heading in to this into this opening weekend of the playoffs.
That is bold. I think anytime you get a touch or an 8.5 higher than one score spread in an NFL playoff game, that is just absolutely crazy. And we have 2 of them in the AFC alone this weekend. We have the Chiefs or the Ravens as 9.5-point favorites over the Steelers, and the Bills as 8.5-point favorites over the Broncos. I'm not going quite as far as you picking them to win, but I think the Steelers cover that +10 with relative ease. I think Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh always play close games. I know earlier this year they lost a 2-score bout between the Ravens and the Steelers, but that was because Russell Wilson fumbled the snap late in the game. They had a chance to score to cut that to 1 score, and it would have covered the 10. So I think if you're given 10 points with Mike Tomlin in the playoffs, I'm going to take that one in my sleep more often than not. I think the Steelers keep that close. The defense does enough, but ultimately it won't be enough, and the Ravens will advance. But I think that game is going to be a lot closer than a lot of people expect.
So Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, obviously, when you throw Burrow's name into that conversation as well, Burrow, for one, coming off his best season ever as the Bengals quarterback and has showed flashes of that greatness throughout his entire run in Cincinnati, but battling injuries, those slow starts early on. There's always something in the regular season that keeps him from getting those full season awards. The defense is one reason he didn't get it this year. It's the opposite but then in the postseason, he's unworldly. There's just that switch that he flips. Right, and we don't question, when Joe Burrow gets to the postseason, we don't question if the spotlight is too big for him. He's proven that there is no moment that's too big for him. That's what's unique about him. The other guys, Lamar Jackson, who's had multiple MVPs, Josh Allen, who looks like he might win his first one. They have all the regular season hardware that Burrow doesn't have. Josh Allen about to possibly get that, but then they disappear come playoff time. The question I have for you as we sit here right now, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen facing similar situations, heavy favorites against their opening round playoff opponents. Which quarterback do you trust the least? Which quarterback are you most concerned about in their opening playoff matchup based on what history has told us about both? Both great regular season quarterbacks have not been able to get it done in the postseason.
I'm most concerned about Josh Allen because I think he has the least help. I know he has the least help around him. So if Lamar Jackson starts tailing off or having a poor playoff performance like we've seen before, they can ride Derrick Henry, which I think certainly helps and takes a little pressure off Lamar Jackson. I'm not taking anything away from James Cook. He's been phenomenal. Vastly different back. You're not pounding James Cook between the tackles 20 times a game. You're getting him in swing passes, short passes, and outside run game. It's not the same at all. And I think Josh Allen has to play well for the Bills to advance. And I'm not saying Lamar Jackson doesn't, because he certainly would have to for them to win the Super Bowl. But I think there's much more wiggle room for Lamar Jackson, especially in this first round against the Steelers, than there is for Josh Allen.
Oh, good, Elliot. You're good. If you guys can't tell, we are all battling a little bit of the sickness. Yesterday, we were all in studio together, just based on how the studio lays out, all social, we're all social distancing yesterday. It doesn't matter. We're all under the weather, but we're fighting through. That's all that matters. But yeah, Elliot, I think I stalled enough. You're good.
Thank you. I do apologize to everybody from all my noises that I make. The mute button that I've been able to do here the past couple minutes have been big. I agree with Jacob. I do think Josh Allen probably you have a little bit more to worry about. Both these quarterbacks don't have a ton of postseason success, but I do think Josh Allen's the one with not a ton of help. And if he goes down this year, there's going to be a lot of questions as to whether or not this guy is good enough to ever win a Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson, people forget in that game last year against the Chiefs, he did enough to win that game. I mean, he absolutely did. The Zay Flowers turnover at the goal line was a massive blow. I think he was good enough to win. I think he's going to be good enough to go to an AFC Championship game this year. Josh Allen, I think somebody's going to figure out the ability to run the ball, or at least scramble a little bit. And when that happens, when you have to force him to throw the football, though I think he's phenomenal. He's fantastic. There's not as much talent receiving on that team than there would be elsewhere. I know the Ravens are down Zay Flowers, it's looking like, but Bateman's been great. Mark Andrews, despite what happened, I don't know what happened in those first 3 weeks.
Likely
to, but since those moments, Mark Andrews has been incredible, maybe the top tight end of the NFL this season. So I do think the Ravens have a little bit more to work with than Josh Allen does. I'd be more concerned if I were a Bills fan than I would be if I were a Ravens fan.
For those reasons that we just said, I think there's way more pressure on Baltimore and Lamar Jackson. I think it's a lot easier to explain a Buffalo fizzle out in this playoffs when you weren't expected to be at this point. You weren't expected to be the 2 seed. Your defense wasn't expected to be playing this well. Your young receivers weren't expected to be playing this well. And Josh Allen has shouldered a lot of that load and gotten you to this point. I think with Derrick Henry and obviously a Zay Flowers injury might help with some excuses on that side of the ball. But with how their defense is playing now, with Derrick Henry in the backfield, Rashad Bateman, like you said, really coming on as of late, I think there is more pressure on Baltimore than there's been on a team in the playoffs in quite some time, because I don't know how you can explain Lamar Jackson not getting to an AFC Championship or to a Super Bowl in this season. I think they have a lot of perfect things set up for them, and if you fizzle out early, especially against the Steelers, I think that's going to be a pretty big indictment on not just Lamar, but John Harbaugh as well. We talked about him potentially being on a hot seat, as crazy as that is to say, but I think at some point you might have to start asking those questions.
So when people do this whole, man, Lamar Jackson's the most disrespected quarterback in the history of the league, I think a lot of the criticism is fair and warranted at times, mainly because, and Peyton Manning got this as well, great regular season quarterback, but fizzled out in the playoffs. I need to reword something when it comes to Josh Allen. Josh Allen actually has not been bad in the postseason. His worst playoff game ever in the NFL was against the Cincinnati Bengals. That was his worst playoff game. In his last game, of course, that he had with Stephon Diggs in that playoff run. So as we sit here and I look at this situation, Lamar Jackson's playoff numbers are garbage. Like, it's not just like, oh, Lamar, he's been on good teams and the team hasn't been able to get it done. He has literally let his team down in every playoff that he's been to. Now, again, you talked about that performance last year, Elliot. You're right. That's one that, finally he had that breakout moment in the playoffs. But before that, if you look at his numbers as a whole, he has played in 6 playoff games. He's only thrown for 1,300 yards. He's thrown 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and has a quarterback rating of about 75. You look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen in the postseason in 10 playoff games averages 272 yards a game. He averages 2 touchdowns a game. He's thrown, again, 21 touchdowns throughout those 10 games, as we talked about, only turning the ball over 4 times. He has a QB rating of over 100. The guy's been actually statistically lights out in the postseason. His team just hasn't got it done, and probably gets to the AFC title game a few years ago if it wasn't for that weird, wonky overtime rule where it didn't even allow him to touch the ball against the Chiefs that year. So I think Josh Allen, actually, and this is going against my bold prediction point where I was like, oh, man, I doubt Josh Allen. I don't think we should doubt Josh Allen. Lamar Jackson, all the criticism and question marks, because everyone uses how can you doubt a 2-time MVP? Because it's a regular season award. And when the postseason gets here, when they've needed him to be him, he has not been that regular season quarterback in the postseason. To Josh Allen's credit, he has. He's been great in the regular season, and he's been great in the postseason. His team just hasn't had that success. Either have the Ravens, but Lamar has played a role in those teams' failures during that stretch to where Josh Allen hasn't. I think that is the difference between the two. I think there's way more pressure on Lamar this weekend to prove that playoff Lamar, that narrative doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There is a lot more pressure there. And Josh Allen, I think, is getting a pass because the Bills tore it down. But, I mean, that game against the Chiefs was not an AFC championship game. That was a divisional game. So he still hasn't been to that conference championship mountaintop. And it's just, I think the point where Lamar Jackson fans and Ravens fans really get upset, and you're right, he has been worse in the playoffs than a lot of these other guys, but he's not held to the same standard as the Josh Allen and the Joe Burrow. At least I don't feel like. I feel like we see both these guys go to the playoffs. Neither of them have won a ring, and we still talk about it more with Lamar Jackson than either of them, especially Josh Allen. When Joe Burrow has won the AFC Championship into the Super Bowl, I understand that kind of sets him apart on the other side when we're talking about all guys without rings. But Josh Allen, I just feel like isn't talked about with the same pressure in the playoffs as Lamar Jackson. But I think that they should be viewed more as equals in terms of playoff success, and not the pedestal that Josh Allen's put on over Lamar Jackson in that conversation.
Well, I think it's because of what we just talked about. I think it's because the team results, like the win-loss results, are not good in either's favor. But I think the individual results is what I think Josh Allen doesn't get as much heat for, that just because he shows up himself. Right? Like we could do that with Joe Burrow this year and say, hey, look at all the deficiencies around him that led to his teams losing. He wasn't part of that. That's Josh Allen in the postseason. He shows up. He does his part. The team around him doesn't. To where Lamar, when you talk about the Ravens not showing up in the postseason, more times than not, if all but one game he's been the guy not showing up in the postseason. And I actually think the MVPs hurt him because there's higher expectations. When Josh Allen with no MVPs, Joe Burrow with no MVPs, when you talk about criticism of quarterbacks, it's like, I think you hold Lamar to a higher standard. Hey, this is a 2-time MVP. At some point, you got to get it done in the postseason too. But those are the two QBs facing the most pressure, I think, is Lamar and Josh Allen. I don't even think it's a hot take. I just think we're bored with Lamar in the regular season. That's why he's probably not going to win MVP this year. Not because he's not good. We're just bored with it. Josh Allen, we're almost bored with the regular season success, but we haven't given him the MVP yet. He's about to get that. But at the same time, Josh Allen's going to get to the point where it can't just be, okay, your numbers are great in the postseason. The great ones lead their teams. Joe Burrow pushed his team to the Super Bowl, sacked 70 times that entire season, 20-plus times in the playoffs, 10-plus times or whatever it was, double digits almost in the win against the Titans. He overcame everything to get to that Super Bowl. Josh Allen's putting up great numbers. What are you overcoming, though? You got to overcome something and push your team to a Super Bowl, and I think that's the pressure on him and Lamar this upcoming year. So,
Lamar Jackson, by the way, last season, just so I could say it. Against the Texans, they won 34-10 in the first round of the playoffs, or in their round of the. Was it the first round? That wasn't the first round, was it? Was it?
No, the Ravens were the 1 seed last year. They had the bye.
That's right. 16-22, 152
Yeah,
yards.
the Texans beat the Browns. The Texans beat the Browns to
Correct.
get there. That's what set up that second round match.
Correct.
I remember
16-22, 152 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 11 carries for 100 yards. Against the Chiefs, 20 for 37, 272, a touchdown, a pick, 8 carries, 54 yards. And again, he did enough to at least tie that football game before his wide receiver threw the game away. I think Lamar is pretty damn good, and we'll see what happens heading into the postseason here. I'm going to be high on the Ravens right now. I'm going to be pretty high on the Ravens.
We can have the playoff performance discussion as much as we want, and it's one that's absolutely warranted and needs to be had when talking about the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. But anyone that wants to detract away from how great of a quarterback he is because he hasn't had a lot of playoff success, that's just silly, and that's foolish, and you're not looking at the bigger picture. Lamar Jackson had one of the highest passer ratings in NFL history this season. He's the first quarterback to go for 4,000 passing yards and 900 rushing yards. He's had his best passing season last year and then got better throwing the ball this year, and he's still just as an effective runner. He doesn't have the world beaters at wide receiver that a lot of other top quarterbacks have. And Mark Andrews, as you already said, Elliot, fell off a lot earlier this year. He's not the same player he was a long time ago. And that backfield, I know they got Derrick Henry this year, but prior to that, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, these aren't superstar players. These aren't world beaters surrounding Lamar Jackson on the offensive side of the football. And he has been incredible. And he deserves every bit of respect that is coming his way in terms of one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
So you don't think if he has a bad, you don't think it should be held against him that he doesn't play well in the playoffs?
Held against him, sure, but he's the third best quarterback in football still. We can have that when we're discussing him versus Joe versus Josh, but it doesn't remove him from that conversation by any means.
Oh no, but I mean, I don't.
I think a lot of people are saying it removes him from that conversation if they lose early in this playoffs, and I think that's what I'm saying is ridiculous.
Yeah. I see, but I agree though. I don't care about regular season accolades to a certain extent. It has to happen in the postseason, and he hasn't had that yet. Joe Burrow's had that. Josh Allen puts up the numbers, but you're right. Look, I don't want to repeat myself. I apologize, but yeah, that. I'm excited for this weekend because of those two things right there. I think everyone's going to be locked in on Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson to see how those two perform in the Bills and the Ravens when it's all said and done. But all right, good stuff. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Buy or sell coming up next. Throw them out a little bit. The Cincinnati Bengals still looking for a defensive coordinator. Buy or sell. The Bengals making a splash defensive coordinator hire. When they announce who their next defensive coordinator is, everyone's going to be like, oh, they did it. They got the big fish. Buy or sell that being the case. Ohio State winning by double digits tonight. Do you buy or sell that? The Bears, they're still looking for a head coach. We talked about them interviewing Pete Carroll earlier on in the show. Do the Bears have the hottest free agent, or do they have the hottest head coaching vacancy in the National Football League? Do you buy or sell that? Plus, what's the chances of both the 1 seeds of the NFC and AFC making it to the Super Bowl? Do you buy or sell the possibility of that happening? We'll get to all of that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. All right, and we are back. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, Elliot Rearing with you here. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Looking out the window here. No snow coming down yet. When are we supposed to get this, avalanche of a snowstorm?
They said 1 is what I saw yesterday, right about 1 o'clock.
Okay. For our Dayton listeners, obviously the show recorded earlier in the day, so you're probably hearing this as we inch closer to 3 o'clock, and I'm sure you're saying, look out the window, buddy. There's tons of snow. Maybe not.
I'm looking at the forecast right now. It says 3 to 11-ish, so it's pushed back a little bit. We're looking at 3 o'clock to 11 o'clock p.m. as the window for this snow, if they're right. My philosophy right now is they were right earlier this week, and they rarely even hit it at 50% clip. So they're going to be wrong this time, and we're going to be okay. But no matter what we are going to get, make sure everyone stays safe.
I laugh because we get mad when they're wrong, and I don't know why. If they're wrong, I'm going to be happy.
Yeah.
When they say, hey, there's a bunch of tornadoes coming, and they don't come, people get mad. I'm like, why? Did you want your house demolished? I don't understand. I get it, but at the same, I wish I could be paid to be wrong, which I am. I am paid I'm paid by 2 different companies to be wrong all the damn time. So I can relate to meteorologists. I can relate to them, at the end of the day. So either way, but yes, I'm hoping they're wrong. I am hoping that they are wrong. I'm over the snowfall as we talked about.
And make sure, why not just stay in? Why not just stay in so you don't get sick and be exposed to the cold air? Just stay at home, watch some football, and have some fun. Because I went outside once this week, and it's cost me my week.
Won't make that mistake again. I promise you that.
I will not.
All right, little buy or sell to close it out. I'll throw them out. You guys respond. So let's start with your Cincinnati Bengals. Look, right now we know what happened this season. One of the best offensive seasons in the history of the franchise, and just was not met with the same result on the defensive side of the ball. And ultimately, whether you could talk about the Patriots loss, the slow start to whatever, ultimately the defense, the consistently bad defense throughout the season, basically costed the Bengals a playoff spot. And now they're looking for a new defensive coordinator. Buy or sell the Cincinnati Bengals making a splash defensive coordinator hire, a hire that makes you say, holy crap, we're going to turn this around. Buy or sell, that being the case for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I got to choke back tears to answer this one, but it's going to be a hard sell. I don't think the Bengals are going to get any of those big names, none of those head coaches, ex-head coaches that we talked about, and I don't even think a guy like an Al Golden, any of those big names are really going to be in the cards, and it's for the reason we talked about a lot with the potential Zach Taylor firing that I failed to bring up with Lou Anarumo. It just slipped my mind, but when you fire Lou Anarumo, you're paying him $1.75 million next year to not be your defensive coordinator. We have to count that in the contract for next year. The Bengals are not going to go pay $5+ million for a defensive coordinator, and a Robert Saleh or anyone of that caliber will cost $4 million. And when you put Lou Anarumo's on top of that, you're up over $5.5 million, and that's just not something the Bengals are going to do. They're going to go get a mid-level DC. They're going to make sure they pay him less than Zach, and I'm not saying that because the Bengals are cheap. I think that's a dynamic of the locker room thing. I think your head coach, having a coordinator make more than your head coach is a little bit of an awkward situation for both those guys and the players, and if you hire Robert Saleh, $4.5 million is what top defensive coordinators get, and that's what Zach Taylor gets. So you'd have to think that those numbers would be pretty close. The Bengals are going to undercut that. I bet they're at about $4 million out the door, counting Lou's 1.75. So we're going to get a lower end DC that I do think will make more than Lou, but none of those big names that we would be really, really excited about.
Yeah, I'm with Jacob. I'm going to sell it. I just know, I know where this organization is. I know how they operate, and we're going to get somebody that I've probably never heard of in the defense next year, I'd imagine. I wouldn't trust it to be completely fixed. And that's not what we are asking for by any means. We've said it over and over again this year. Nobody's asking for a top 10 defense. We're just hoping that it's not the worst in the NFL. So if we can get somebody for cheap and that are able to help rebuild the defense just a little bit better than Lou did this past season, then it'll be a win. But I'm going to say it's a sell on this.
Yeah, I could see the Bengals' approach being, hey, we're not gonna go heavy on a huge name that cost a lot to be defensive coordinator, but we're maybe going to spend a lot on the defensive side of the ball. And let me ask you this: I don't want to hijack this segment with this question, but something to think. Would you rather have a Robert Saleh as defensive coordinator, or a big name like that, and they don't spend a ton in free agency defensively this year, or maybe a no-name defensive coordinator that you don't feel all warm and fuzzy about, but man, they go hard in the paint in the free agent market to fix some holes defensively. I think it's an easy answer, or is it? Is it more important for them to have the defensive coordinator or the players? The easy answer is both. But knowing how they operate, that's always the big question here.
The answer to that question determines how much you believe in the pieces we already have. How much do you think Lou Anarumo's inability to develop has affected Dax Hill, DJ Turner, Miles Murphy, a lot of these young guys? If you don't think that's a Lou problem, if you think these guys just aren't good enough, then you take the cheaper DC and more money. I personally believe in Miles Murphy. I believe in Dax Hill at a cornerback role. I believe in DJ Turner. He looked great this year before he got hurt. I would love all those guys to have a little bit more than we've seen so far, and I think a top-tier defensive coordinator could get that out of them, but I don't know that a lower guy will. And if we hire a lower tier guy, I think that we're going to be relying on free agency a little bit more. And if it works, great. But we've seen it not work a little bit too much for me.
Fair enough. All right, on to the next one. Buy or sell the Chicago Bears. They're looking for their next head coach. We talked about, they interviewed Pete Carroll earlier on this week. I thought that was an interesting name, but we figured, like, Mike Vrabel, all the big name head coaching free agents out there have the Bears job circled as maybe the job to land, or is it the Chicago Bears have the hottest head coaching vacancy in the National Football League right now? Buy or sell?
I lean Patriots. I think the Patriots have the best head coaching vacancy with a top 5 pick in their cap space and Drake May, but I think the Bears are pretty close behind. I think Caleb Williams, I believe in him to the moon. I think he's going to be a great quarterback in this league, and I think they have good pieces on defense. I think the Bears are very, very high up there. But I think with the cap space and the draft pick the Patriots have, that is, in my opinion, the most desirable opening. The Bears haven't been turned down for an interview yet, which is good. That's a good sign with their front office disconnect. That you certainly have that as a worry when you're offering interviews to these top coaches, but they've gotten them all so far. So hopefully that'll continue and they can make a good decision. I think it's up there, certainly top 3, but I lean Patriots as the most desirable job opening, and that's why I think that's where the most desirable coach in Mike Vrabel will end up.
I'm going to sell it because I think the Bears organization's a joke, but is it crazy to say that the Jaguars have one of the better openings?
No,
because I think the Jaguars, despite what I think,
if you believe in Trevor,
despite what I think of Trevor Lawrence and that organization, I do think they've got a ton of talent around him right now. It didn't work this year, a lot of injuries, and I'd argue a subpar coach. But I do think that's not a bad job in the NFL right now. I agree with Jacob that I would rather be a coach under the Kraft family. I'd rather be with the Patriots. I think that's probably the best job. I'm never going to say the Bears is a desirable job just because of how they've always been run.
Yeah, I think Caleb Williams not taking that next step forward really has kept that from being the case, because if Caleb Williams looked like the phenom that he was built up to be coming out of the draft, I do think without a question, even with the question marks about the front office of the Bears, even with the shaky foundation of the Chicago Bears, you go to the best quarterback available. Drake, the Patriots, you're right. I went from a not so desirable situation over the last couple of years to looks like you have a very good quarterback.
Yep.
You have him on a rookie deal, so you're going to have flexibility to spend, and they have the cap space as well. And they have a top draft pick. So I think that when you look at all of those things combined, the Patriots have a very interesting I think that's the best spot right now. I do like the Bears. I think there's something to work with Caleb Williams, but I don't think it's the number one spot in the National Football League right now. And we could debate Trevor Lawrence and the Jags or Williams and the Bears of which is the better landing spot for a head coach. And it's like Jacob said, it's all in how you view each quarterback when it's all said. One's cheap. One's still affordable. You can get out from Caleb Williams technically if he's not the guy. There's flexibility there. If you're the Jags head coach, you're stuck with Trevor Lawrence at $55 million a year when it's all said and done. Next up, buy or sell. Last one here. Ohio State winning by double digits tonight. They obliterated Tennessee in the first round at the Shoe. They obliterated Oregon in the Rose Bowl in the rematch between the two after losing by 1 point back in early October. And they blew them out. Do they continue that trend? Buy or sell Ohio State winning by double digits against the Longhorns later on tonight?
Bye. Yeah, I'm all the way in on the Buckeyes beating the Longhorns. I know that a lot of the money's rolling in on Ohio State, which is making some people feel uncomfortable. But when you're a really, really good team, that stuff doesn't matter. And I think Ohio State's playing the way a lot of us expected them to play all season long. And I asked Mike Golick Jr. if he believed the same thing was going to happen because I had to get out of my echo chamber. I've been talking to a lot of Ohio State fans that were saying this was going to be another blowout. But as soon as Golick agreed with me that they were going to keep rolling tonight, that gave me the utmost confidence, and I think Will Howard's going to have another great day, much to Emmanuel Acho's chagrin, and the Buckeyes are going to roll on to the national championship and hopefully get that job done against Notre Dame as well, but I don't expect it to be much of a test against Texas.
Texas hasn't really played anybody this season. They've, their big opponents, Georgia, you lose twice. I think Ohio State's going to steamroll them. I don't think this game's going to be competitive. I'm going to say Ohio State wins this game 45-15. I think this is over really, really quickly.
I'm not quite that high. I'm 34-21.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of those where it might be closer than we think early on, but I do think Texas's inability to move the ball consistently, I think their offense is going to get tired as the defense, is going to get tired as the game goes on. I like Texas's defense, but with the offense's inability to consistently move the ball down the field, I think Ohio State's going to wear them down as the game goes on. The defense is going to be tired. So if you find yourself in a close game heading into the fourth quarter and that defense is gassed, I would hate to be a defensive back that's gassed when you have Emeka Egbuka and when you have obviously Jeremiah Smith, and you look at the talent across the board and Carnell Tate and others. I would hate to be a tired and gassed defensive back for Texas if that's the case. And, you have to stop Trevion Henderson and, of course, Quinshon Judkins in the run game. I like Texas. I think they're much better than people give them credit for when they bring up they haven't played anybody. But at the same time, their offense is what scares me. I just don't think it's consistent enough to keep up with Ohio State in a shootout. I like Ohio State to win by double digits. I just don't think it'll be as much of a blowout. I think the score, it won't be an indictment of how the game feels, I guess, throughout when it's all said and done.
The conversation Texas fans are having about this game that kind of leaves me perplexed is they're saying they're going to put cornerback 2 in Malik Muhammad on Jeremiah Smith with their safety over the top of that, a classic Bill Belichick double team on a number 1 receiver, and then put the Thorpe Award winner, best DB in college football according to those voters, Jahdae Barron, on Emeka Egbuka to hopefully eliminate those top 2 receivers of the Ohio State passing game, and then dropping 6 or 7 basically all day long to eliminate that. But like Kinner said, it's a lot more than just 2 guys on Ohio State's offense. You're going to drop 7 guys, double Jeremiah, and put Barron on Emeka Egbuka, and then leave Carnell Tate single covered and leave 4 guys in the box against Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to work. I think Ohio State can beat them way too many ways for this to work, and I don't think, as crazy as it sounds after the last 2 games, I don't think Texas and their fans are giving Ohio State's team enough credit with the different ways they can beat you. I think they're way too confident in this defense and how they can affect this game, and I think it's going to show pretty early.
All right, good stuff.
Justin, real quick.
Yes, sir. Yep. What you got?
You got this is how we'll end the show today. This is Jacob. This is an original bit. I'd call it "Whose Line Is It Anyway?"
I like that.
It's an original bit. Let me ask you guys this: the 11th ranked Kansas Jayhawks come to Cincinnati tomorrow.
Okay.
Whose line is it anyway? What's the spread, do you think, in that game?
Kansas minus 11.
In Cincinnati? What'd you say it was?
Yep.
Is it at Cincinnati?
Yep.
I'm going to say Kansas minus 6.5.
Yeah, how about the Bearcats minus 2?
What?
Ooh. Rock chalk. There you go, baby.
Bearcats
Money.
minus 1.5 to 2. No.
Money. Good start to the weekend, baby.
The game.
Buckeyes minus 6, Jayhawks plus 2. Take it to the bank.
Shout out to the Bearcats, by the way. They broke Dayton. Dayton, they lost to UMass the other night after being a 10.5 point favorite. You broke them. By the way, the Whose Line Is It Anyway bit, I like that.
It's a good one. Maybe we steal that.
I do. There you go.
That's
maybe we just run that.
Shout out to Casey, who wasn't on the show today, but if you hear any coughing in the re-airing of this, we just agreed during the last break that we're going to blame Casey. So our radio listeners, if you hear hacking and coughing in the background, blame Casey. Casey McAllister. We'll put out his email on socials and stuff. You can complain to him when it's all said and done. Guys, have a good weekend. We'll do this again on Monday. Until next week, this has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.